Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today in our worship time at the North Bloomfield United Methodist Church. My friends, join us here today as we talk about the power of love to make life come alive. My friends, we read today from the Gospel of John, reading there in chapter 13, verses 34 to 35. And shall we listen to these words of Jesus, taken from John's Gospel? A new command I give to you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. My friends, these words from the Gospel of John, taken from chapter 13, verses 34 to 35. My friends, Frederick Buechner, that great Christian theologian, he once made this observation. He wrote, "What man or woman, if they gave serious thought to what having children inevitably involved, would ever have them? And yet what man and woman, once having had them and loved them, would ever want it otherwise?" Buechner says, "There is the gospel truth that he who does not love remains in death. He who does not love remains in death." My friends, love, it is the fullest expression of the aliveness of a human being created in the image of a loving God. The great philosopher Blaise Pascal, his statement, "I think, therefore I am," it was indeed a very profound statement. However, the phrase, "I love, therefore I am," it is an even more profound statement. My friends, when we love in life, we are most fully alive in the truest sense of the word. My friends, there is a very wise saying that goes, "There is only one happiness, to love and be loved." If we fail in love in life, we fail in all things else. If we succeed in love, then we can never, ever be a failure in God's eyes. And whose eyes could matter more? My friends, in life we live to love, but we also love in order to fully live, to be most fully alive. And so, again, somewhere on this journey between two hospitals, the hospital that we are born in and the hospital that we die in, it is God's hope that we learn to love. We are put on earth a space to learn to bear the beams of love, the poet William Blake once said. My friends, we are put here on this earth to learn to love. Again, as Frederick Buechner said, "He who does not love remains in death." My friends, how is that so? How is that so? Well, maybe we could better understand that statement just a little bit better if we looked at what the opposite of love is. If we looked at the reality of sin, which is, in a sense, sin is unlove. Sin is the very opposite of love and loving. The reality of sin, as the great theologian Randall Niebuhr once explained it, the reality of sin, it is excessive self-concern to the detriment of other people. Sin is the heart all curved in upon itself. The heart being so very selfish, very self-centered, as Martin Luther, the great Protestant reformer, as he once said. Human pride lies at the root of all sin. All sins, they are sins of pride at heart. My friends, at the heart of all sin, there lies a false sovereignty. You think that the world just revolves all around you. You think it's all about you. Sin, it is very selfish and very self-centered at heart and in its very demeanor. There isn't much joy in a very selfish, self-centered life because there isn't much love in a very selfish, self-centered life. And joy, it is always a byproduct of love and loving. And the slow, very erosive punishment for sin, for living a selfish and very self-centered life, it is the isolation imposed by the gradual thickening of the walls of the Spirit. It is the gradual hardening of our hearts. It is the gradual deadening of our sensitivities toward others and other people. It is the gradual blinding of our eyes to others' needs and others' pain in life. The gradual punishment for sin is the gradual deadening of ourselves to life itself. And my friends, if you lock yourself into too many of these selfish, self-centered ways of human relating, if they become so habitual and so second nature to you, well, there may come a point where you may not be able to break free of them. They have become so very second nature to your life and to your living that you unthinkingly and unknowingly have done is you have slowly over time, you have robbed yourself of your capacity to love in life. In other words, you have become so very selfish and self-centered in your own personal demeanor now that you couldn't even love even if you tried. Someone once said that God's judgment, it is built into the nature of things. Sin walls us in and others out. William Sloane Coffin, that great preacher from Riverside, he once said, if you rend the bond of love in life by sin, you experience loneliness, which is the experience of the bond of love rent. We were made and we were meant to love, and if we don't, we suffer. In other words, my friends, the wages of sin is isolation, emptiness, and loneliness, a form of acute spiritual starvation. The Apostle Paul, he said very simply that the wages of sin is death, spiritual death. In other words, my friends, if you live your life selfishly and so very self-centeredly and wholly unto yourself, your life will always be a shipwreck. The novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky, he once said, hell was the suffering of being unable to love. Or, as it has been translated, hell is not to love anymore. Others have said that hell is the loneliness of being unable to relate meaningfully with others and with anyone. While others have said that hell is an empty heart. It is a heart that is devoid of love. You have so locked and walled and trapped yourself into so many of these very selfish and self-centered ways of human relating that you are now left to the loneliness, to the emptiness, to the isolation, the acute spiritual starvation of the selfish and very self-centered life that you've locked and walled and trapped yourself into. The Gospels, they speak of the unspeakable spiritual tragedy, the menacing possibility that a person made by God for the great richness and fullness and great beauty of boundless loving community with God and with others forever, they now find themselves trapped and walled into a cocoon of suffocating spiritual aloneness, into a life of abject loneliness and isolation and emptiness that is indeed of their own making. Michelangelo, he once said hell was truth seen too late. Indeed, as one has said, sin wouldn't have many takers if its consequences always occurred immediately. Sin is unlove. Sin, it is the opposite of love and loving. As Buechner said, he who does not love remains in death. Now, my friends, having looked at the opposite of love, let's take a look at love itself and the transforming power of love to make life come vibrantly alive for a person. 2 is not 2 times 1. 2 is 1,000 times 1 when love is present. The great G.K. Chesterton once observed. For in the end, love is greater than the sum of its hearts. My friends, we all have what one another needs to be fully human in life and to be fully alive. In love, it has that power to make love come fully alive for us and for others. Now, Tillich, another Christian theologian, he tells a very, very beautiful story about the transforming power of love. He wrote, I once knew a very, very old married couple who radiated a tremendous happiness, and the wife especially, who was almost unable to move because of old age and illness, and in whose kind old face the joys and the sufferings of many years had etched 100 ruins. She was filled with such gratitude for life that I was touched to the quick. And involuntarily I asked myself, what could possibly be the source of this kindly old person's radiance? Otherwise, they were very common people, and the room indicated only the most modest of comfort. But suddenly I knew where it all came from. For I saw these two speaking to each other, and their eyes hanging upon each other. And all at once it became very, very clear to me that this woman was dearly, dearly loved. And it was as if she was like a stone that had been lying in the sun for years and years, absorbing all of its radiant warmth, and now was reflecting back cheerfulness and warmth and serenity. Let me express it this way, said Tillich. It was not because she was this kind of cheerful and pleasant person that she was loved by her husband all of those years. It was probably the other way around. Because she was so loved, she became the person that I now saw before me. And the thought continued to pursue me, and the more it pursued me, the more it lost all its merely edifying and sentimental features, until finally they were gone altogether. For if this is true, then I surely must come to the following conclusion. If my life's partner, or my friend, or just people generally, often seem to be so strange, and I ask myself, have I made the right marriage, the right friendship? Is this particular person really the one who is suited to me? Then I cannot answer the question in the style of a neutral diagnosis that would list the reasons for and against. For what happens then is that the question, it turns back upon myself, and then it reads, have I perhaps bestowed too little love upon this other person, that he has become so cold and empty? Have I perhaps caused him to become what perhaps he really has become? The other person whom God has joined to me is never what he is apart from me. He is not only bone of my bone, he is also boredom of my boredom, and lovelessness of my lovelessness. And it is exactly the same way with our relation to God, says Tillich. If a person in life is steeped in emptiness and boredom, the reason for it is that he has not allowed himself to be loved by God and has not put himself in his hands. One who does not love makes the other person wither and dry up. And one who does not allow himself to be loved dries up too. For love is indeed a creative thing. My friends, such is the transforming power of love. My friends, as I said before in life, there is only one happiness, to love and to be loved. As Frederick Buechner said, he who does not love remains in death. To live a life of sin is to travel down a very, very slippery slope leading toward a life of loneliness and emptiness and isolation. But to live a life of love can make life come beautifully and vibrantly alive for us and for others. For 2 is not 2 times 1. 2 is 1,000 times 1 when love is present. For when we love, my friends, we are most fully alive in the truest sense of the word. For love is a creative thing. My friends, let us choose the way of love in our lives so that we might live our lives to the fullest. So that we might more and more and more become the kind of people that a loving God always intended us to be. My friends, God grant that might be so for us in our lives. God grant that it might be so for us. Amen. Amen. My friends, thank you for joining us here today as we talked about the power of love to make human life come alive. My friends, I would like to thank all those who have continued to send their tithes and their offerings very faithfully to the life of this church during these very, very difficult times around the coronavirus pandemic. And if you would like to make an offering to the church, you are asked to make your check out to the church and to send them to the North Bloomfield United Methodist Church at Post Office Box 68, or to send them to our financial secretary, Darlene Fenton, who lives at 9166 Plank Road, so that we might be able to continue our ministry at the church now and on into the future. My friends, thank you for being with us here today. And I hope that you will be able to join with us again next week. My friends, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us here this morning.